Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Holy shit. And I'm not laughing at Vrabel and Dianna because I'm just, holy shit. Breaking news. The New York Post has dropped more photos, and these have Vrabel and Dianna kissing in a tree, sitting in a tree, KSSSING. It actually has them sitting in a bar. And apparently New York in 2020. Now, at first, when I first saw these photos, I actually thought it was at Red Door in Nashville. And then when I read the Page 6 article, it was in New York. We'll get into that in just a second. First, I do want to tell you about the presenting sponsor of this program, which is Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Hiller takes great care of my home, and they can do the exact same for you. They've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated. Happy you will be, or the service is free. If you've got an electrical issue, an HVAC issue, you've got to call Hiller. My friends at Hiller, they'll take great care of you. Trust me, they are the best. That's right. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They are proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. They have true transparency pricing where they line item every part of the job before they get to work. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. Okay, breaking news. Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini, more pictures have dropped from the New York Post. And I am putting these up on the stream, as you can see. Again, I actually thought when I first saw the pictures, I got a DM and then immediately got like 18 different text messages from people being like, oh my God, I thought this was Red Door in Midtown. I mean, I don't go to the bars very often, but I know Midtown and I know Red Door. New York Times, Page 6, quote, Dianna Russini and married Mike Vrabel caught kissing at NYC bar in bombshell new photos taken 6 years before the scandal. Reading from the New York Post, quote, Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini were, quote, all over each other at a secluded bar in New York City 6 years before they were caught holding hands and hugging at an Arizona resort. As seen in exclusive new pics obtained by Page 6, the New England Patriots coach and the NFL reporter were spotted together inside the dimly lit Tribeca Tavern in the early hours of March 11, 2020. So that is right before the world shut down with COVID. They sat close to each other while conversing at the bar, at one point appearing to share a kiss. And if you're looking at the stream, you can see right there the middle photo. I mean, that looks like them kissing. I mean, it's hard not to put two and two together here. They were kissing and they were all over each other. An eyewitness told Page 6 he had a ring on, which you can see in the third photo on the right. If you're, again, looking at the stream, you can see his wedding ring on it. At the time the photos were snapped, Vrabel was already married to wife Jen, while Russini said I do to her now husband, Shake Shack executive Kevin Goldschmidt, just 6 months later. Both share 2 kids with their respective partners. The sportscaster and NFL coach, whose wedding ring was visible in the photos, were, quote, very close to each other throughout the evening, according to our insider, who witnessed Russini's legs in between Vrabel's legs. Jesus. The eyewitness told Page 6 that Russini and Vrabel were at a hole-in-the-wall bar around midnight and stayed for at least an hour flying under the radar. They were having a glorious time. They were giving each other pecks and a bunch of pecks constantly. There was nobody in there. Nobody knew who they were. I don't even think the bartenders did. At the time the photos were snapped, Vrabel was working as head coach of the Tennessee Titans, while Russini was an NFL reporter at ESPN, extensively covering the team. The reporter posted a photo of herself on the ESPN set with host Laura Rutledge just hours before her bar outing with Vrabel, joking in the caption, a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead walk into a bar. Jesus. Page Six contacted both Vrabel and Dianna on Wednesday afternoon regarding the photos. While neither commented for the story, Vrabel told ESPN just hours later that he will miss day 3 of the NFL draft to enter counseling. The bombshell new pics come 6 years before Page Six obtained photos of Vrabel and Russini holding hands and hugging at the Ambiente in Sedona, Arizona, a boutique resort with stunning views of the Brins Mesa mountain range. I mean, I'm looking at these photos, and I mean, there are even more photos than I have up on the stream. You know, again, I buy the PI take, you know, again, that I heard from a source close to Dianna. I buy that. I have a really, really hard time right now as I'm looking at these, thinking that in 2020 there was a PI stalking Vrabel. And there couldn't have been a PI stalking Dianna. At that point in time, Dianna was like the 8th level insider at ESPN, and she wasn't even married. So I don't know what to make of this. I will just say this. I brought up in our first emergency show of the day, I brought up the idea when it came to Vrabel and Dianna. I brought up the fact that I guess this is crazy. Like, I mean, I finally see this and I'm like, holy shit. I brought up earlier today that 2 PR pros reached out to me and they said something else is coming. And immediately something else comes down the pipe. I mean, I woke up this morning, saw the news about Vrabel and thought, oh my God, he's going to miss day 3 of the draft. And then everybody starts talking about Vrabel missing day 3 of the draft. And I get I get the text message people are talking about. I mean, the PR pros are saying there's something new coming down the pipe. And one PR pro said to me that if the Patriots knew about this coming, that he was going to miss the draft on Tuesday, then he should have said that instead of waiting until Thursday to make it another news cycle. And my guess is until midnight, I'm sure Page Six called Vrabel and said, hey, we've got these pictures. And I'm sure that Vrabel and the Patriots decided, you might need to go away. Here's the crazy thing. Mike Vrabel is scheduled to speak to the media today. So I don't know if after the Patriots draft Denzel Boston with the 31st pick or Caleb Lomu, if Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf are going to get up there and they're going to say, we're only going to talk football questions. Karen, go ahead. Mike, do you guys view Caleb Lomu as a tackle or as a guard? He's going to get up there. They're going to say only football questions. And the first question is going to be, Mike, what about the pictures from 2020 in the New York Post? I mean, I almost wonder if the NFL, who mandates that the head coach and the general manager speak on night 1 of the draft, if the NFL is going to tell the Patriots, just send Elliott Wolf up there. Like, just go send Elliott Wolf and just let that be. Because I guarantee you the NFL hates this. Like, I guarantee you that the NFL hates that on the draft night, this is now a big story. 6 years, which is unbelievable to me. And for everybody that thought there was something else coming down the pipe, there's your answer. I kept saying, what could be such a big deal that would force Vrabel to miss day 3 of the draft? What could be such a big deal that would wow us at this point in time? Because even if the New York Post had more photos from the Ambiente of Vrabel and Dianna sitting there making out, well, we kind of already knew that that was happening because Vrabel all but admitted to the affair already. So that doesn't seem like a big deal. Pictures of them 6 years ago making out? That's kind of a big deal. 6 years ago. And again, these are just the pictures that we have up here. These are just 3 of them. The New York Post has like 10 of them. And I don't know if I don't know if Vrabel's going to survive this. I said earlier today, I hope this isn't the end of Mike Vrabel because I enjoy the NFL with Mike Vrabel in it. As somebody who is a Mike Vrabel detractor, as somebody that thinks Vrabel is incredibly overrated. He's a good coach. He's not Vince Lombardi. I enjoy Vrabel in the league. And for the most part, when it comes to affairs and football, if you can still play or you can still coach, normally people don't care. Just like in the end, people don't care about Rick Pitino's affairs. They laugh at it, but I can promise you St. John's likes having Rick Pitino as their coach, and Mike Vrabel is a very good coach. But now if there's more and more and more and more that keeps coming out about Vrabel, and if people have more and more and more dirt on Vrabel, and where are they getting all this dirt from? How do you hold back dirt in the vault for 6 years? And if that's happening, I don't know what Vrabel's going to be able to do. I mean, I talked to somebody in the media today who said that, like, hey, Vrabel's career is going down the shitter. Hers is already over, but Vrabel's career is headed down that path. And until today, I would have said there's no way. Again, it's football. And, I mean, when I heard that there was more that was coming down the pipe, like when I heard somebody say, oh, there's got to be more, that Vrabel's going to get away, I mean, I figured it had to involve like a pregnancy of some sort. That, oh, yeah, you know, they found out Dianna Russini is pregnant. Now that's like, holy shit. Or, oh, Mike Vrabel got somebody else pregnant. Then it's like, oh, my God, that's fucking insane. This, though, 6 years? 6 years. You know, I thought I was giving myself credit, and we still have the text messages. If you're looking at the stream, this is a text message I sent to somebody on March 22nd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. So I was on the air when I sent this text message, which means that we probably played the cut on the show. And I said to this person, I said, quote, I think Vrabel is banging Dianna Russini from ESPN, but I can't speculate it publicly. The person texted back and said, excuse me? Ha. Again, that's a really random text message to get in 2022, just randomly during the day. Hey, I think Vrabel's banging Dianna Russini, but I don't know. I said, so Dianna always has weird scoops on the Titans and is totally in the bag for the team. And today on ESPN went all in on talking about how great Vrabel is and how bad John Robinson's rosters are. And so now I think he's the source and he's fucking her. That came from me again on March 22nd at 5:30. And it had this cut in there that, whoops, I got rid of, and now I have to find it back. I have to find the cut. I thought this is why I don't get rid of these cuts, or I shouldn't get rid of these cuts. But it was a cut where Bart Scott and Dianna Russini were arguing over the AFC South. And in the cut, Bart Scott and Dianna Russini are arguing about the AFC South. Bart Scott says Indianapolis is better than Tennessee because Indianapolis acquired Matt Ryan. Dianna says, but they still have Mike Vrabel. And Mike Vrabel still elevates rosters that aren't even that good. And I'm like, well, I know who the source is now because it's not going to be John Robinson. Because John Robinson's source is not going on TV and saying John Robinson's rosters stink, which is what Dianna was saying. That was the moment that I was like, uh-oh. But apparently this had been going on for 2 years before that. A year later was the infamous CJ Stroud draft, where I believe Vrabel told Dianna reported, let the cat out of the bag. Houston, according to Charles Robinson, was going to take Will Anderson at 2, trade back up with Seattle at 5 to take Stroud. Instead, they took Stroud at 2 when they heard Tennessee was going to 3. And because of that, I thought Dianna and Vrabel had crossed the line. And that is when we started playing this on our program. Boom.
This Dianna Russini report comes directly from the desk of Mike Vrabel, most likely.
So we used to play that all the time. Whenever there was a Dianna report about Vrabel, I'd be like, Ian, play it. And Ian would play the cut. And that was in 2022. In 2023. 2022 was when I first started thinking there was something there. And these pictures were 2 years before that. I do wonder this, though. You guys tell me. Do you think this changes anything? I mean, I think it is a real big, bad look that Mike Vrabel is missing day 3 of the draft. I think it is a real big, bad look that Mike Vrabel has been cheating on his wife, allegedly, for at least over 6 years. I think it is a real bad look. But I don't know if this changes anything that we care about. Other than for us to be like, oh, shit. We already knew Vrabel lied to the Post when he said it was laughable. We already knew that Vrabel was softly admitting it on Wednesday when he got up and talked about tough conversations and personal and private matters. We knew that, again, it was super screwed up to have him miss day 3 of the draft. Yesterday, when the page 6 photos came out that had them at the Ambiente where it looked like Dianna was at breakfast, I did an emergency podcast. I said, I don't even think that this is like surprising at all. I mean, if we just had those pictures of Dianna and Vrabel, and I'm talking about if I just put them up on the screen, the one on the left where it shows Vrabel and Dianna at breakfast. I mean, to me, that is an acceptable source and reporter interaction. They're at a secluded restaurant where people wouldn't see it, and they're talking about info and sourcing and things like that. You can argue that one away. You can't argue the kissing ones from 6 years ago. You can't argue the hot tub. You can't argue the interlocking hands with the mountain in the background. So we already knew all of that. It's just right now, it's the shock value of 6 years. But I mean, I'm shocked by this. And I think it's the 6 years. A lot of you people have been asking about Joe Rexrode. Caroline just texted me and said, oh my God, Diana's first son is named Michael. I'm very careful in this. I want to be very careful in this to not really talk about Diana's kids because they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything wrong. They're little kids. I mean, when we talk about counseling and everything else, I hope that they go on to live incredibly fulfilling lives and incredibly fulfilling lives where they still end up respecting both of their parents. That may end up being hard, but I hope that's what happens. But I'm a big fan of King of the Hill. And on King of the Hill, you know, I hate when people reference TV shows and movies because not everybody watched it or whatever, but there's infidelity in King of the Hill, and there's a son who's Native American, and the boyfriend was Native American, and the husband is Caucasian. And this situation started to remind me of that a little bit. Wow. I mean, this is crazy. Jimmy says, when this dropped, I was thinking it's time to see what Stillman has to say. And for us local Boston people, what do Felger and Maz have to say? By the way, my neighbors are in town. My neighbors live in Boston, but they just bought a house next door to us. And they've had it for like a year and they haven't lived there. And they're in town this weekend because I guess people in Massachusetts are off of school this week. And they were like, oh, we'd love to get together sometime. And I'm like, oh, I'm persona non grata in Boston right now. Although I actually think Boston's kind of like, hey, Stillman, he's telling it like it is. Many people out there are asking about Joe Rexrode. So, and I'm sure you'll get really mad at me for relaying this conversation, but I'm going to do it. I texted Joe at 11:31 and I said, want to come on my pod again in 5 minutes? And then I said, I'm kidding. He said, no, man, I have a job. Joe, this changes nothing, in all capital letters. And I said, no. It means I was right. My Spidey sense. Because that is what led me to believe in 2022, based off of that Bart Scott cut, that these two were doing it, was my Spidey sense. And you can say whatever you want, but it was just a way she said it. I will say this. There was one point in my life where I found out somebody, like my Spidey sense went into gear. I was about 20 years old, maybe 21 at the time. And I discovered somebody that I knew was having an affair with somebody else. And I was talking to that person and they said something, just a tiny little context clue. And it was the first time in my life that I felt the light bulb pop on in my head. Again, I'm 21 years old. I don't have a lot of life experience. And I feel that light bulb pop on in my head. And I'm like, oh my God, he's having an affair with her. And then I told somebody I was really close with who was older than me. And he looked at me and was like, she's blowing him. And I was like, okay. And we would all later come to find out very quickly that she was in fact blowing him, that they were having a relationship. And that was the development of my Spidey sense. And when it comes to my Spidey sense, I don't throw this around often that I think people are doing it. I don't sit there and say things like, I think every woman reporter slept their way to the top. I don't believe that. I think, if I'm allowed to say this, like, can I say who I think the most beautiful person on TV is? Or is that like too sexist and Joe Rexrode's going to get mad? I don't think most women that are at the top sleep their way to the top. I just don't. I don't assume it. I didn't assume it when it came to Vrabel and Dianna. But I heard her defense of Vrabel, and I'm like, oh my God, I think they're doing it. So I did go back and get the clip. This is Russini. This is when I thought they were doing it, was when Bart Scott and Russini got into it. And listen to how she just shits on John Robinson's roster.
So last I checked, too, Derrick Henry still plays in Tennessee, and they were the #1 team in the AFC without him when he was playing. How do you miss the Tennessee Titans in here?
Have you seen Ryan Tannehill, who now is going to have
consistency? Has Mike Vrabel had a losing season yet? No.
I think what we've learned
Has he figured out how to make that team really good when their roster isn't even that exceptional?
Has he figured out how to overcome a shitty roster? Yeah, don't think John Robinson's the source there. And so that was when I was like, okay, Vrabel is Dianna's source. And I don't know at that point in time 4 years ago what led my Spidey sense to start tingling, that I thought that they were fucking. But as you can see by the timestamp on the text message, March 22nd, 2022, 5:30, I said, I think Vrabel is banging Dianna Russini from ESPN, but I can't speculate it publicly. And so I asked Joe Rexrode. I said, all right, because he said this changes nothing. And I said, no. It means I was right. Joe says, no. You were bullshit speculating based on nothing. But good news for you. Sometime next week, you can count on some bare-ass Vrabel photos so you can keep doing emergency sex talk pods. To which I said, the earlier pod today was about Vrabel missing day 3 of the draft, and I'm pretty sure that is newsworthy. So, again, I mean, I don't think this really does change anything other than it confirms the fact that they were lying, and we already knew, or at least we already thought that they were lying. The wedding ring in the photo, man, that's hard. That's hard to accept. It's like, oh my goodness. Somebody texted me, I don't know if I agree with this, and said if Vrabel was an honorable man and actually cares for Russini, he would resign too. She shouldn't suffer alone if this is an actual love affair. So I said this like 2 weeks ago, and I was afraid I was going to get in a lot of trouble for this take. And I said, I think Vrabel's in love with Russini. Again, there's something about it when it comes to Vrabel, and I can't explain it. Again, it's my Spidey sense, but I know Vrabel. I know Vrabelese. I know what Vrabel is thinking. I know what Vrabel is when he's dodging accountability. It's like I can feel Vrabel. It's like I have the force, and I can just, I don't know. I don't understand it. He was that way. I kind of got that way with Rand Carthon, where I could seep out his bullshit when he was the general manager, but that was just so blatantly obvious, even though so many of you people didn't want to believe it. But with Vrabel, I could really, I studied every move of his because that was my job. One time I asked him a question at a press conference about a quote of his that had been in a piece in the Ringer that had dropped that day, and I could tell he was pissed because he was like, oh, I appreciate you following my career or whatever. It's like, that's the job. I'm a local radio host, and you're the NFL coach. That is the job. But so I know Vrabel so well. And when I saw those pics of them with the interlocked fingers, and I saw his face, I said, I have never seen him happier. I think he's in love with Russini. But you can be in love with Russini and also say, but I love my family as well. I love my kids respecting me. Just because I also love you and I like having sex with you doesn't mean that I don't love my wife. So I don't think that if this is a true love story, Vrabel should resign. And I do think Vrabel loves Dianna, but I think at some point, push does come to shove. Now with Dianna, I don't know where she goes from here, but I've never really known. I told you guys again, and I wasn't kidding. If I was the CEO of OnlyFans, I would be all in on trying to hire Dianna Russini today. And not to do porn, but more importantly, to be the NFL insider for OnlyFans. So it looks like OnlyFans is trying to get people to believe that they create content that's not porn. I haven't gone through all of the OnlyFans libraries, but I assume that OnlyFans is pretty much 99% porn. So if you wanted to believe, if you're OnlyFans, if you wanted to make people think that you weren't just porn, you hire Dianna to be an NFL insider. She does her podcast on your platform. She writes her articles on your platform. And could you imagine right now if Dianna Russini was like, I'm launching a podcast with OnlyFans right now, and I'm going to be responding to all of this, how many views it would get? But other than that, I think her career is over. Somebody said to me that they think, somebody in the league, that they think this is it for Dianna. That there may not be a spot for her and I agree. I can't see an NBC or an ESPN or The Athletic, the New York Times, these truly, I can't see it. Whoa! Unbelievable. So no, Joe Rexroad says I don't get any credit for having been right from 2022. That I don't get it. I believe I get credit. Caleb says she has Barstool written all over her now. I don't know if Portnoy is going to jump into that. I don't know, though. But I think she could get more money from going to OnlyFans. And again, I'm not saying do porn. I'm saying be OnlyFans' NFL insider. I think she could get more money for that. If Dianna said, hey, if OnlyFans wants people to say, we are not just porn, but we are a subscription site that is trying to bring creators and buyers together. You know, I don't know anybody that's on OnlyFans that doesn't do porn, but I know that OnlyFans has tried for years to argue that, oh, no, we're more than that. If that's the case, go get Dianna to be your NFL insider. I think that's the only shot she's really got. One person says 6 years is a long time. So true. One person says, can you imagine how much more the husband has? So, again, I want to go back to these page 6 photos that, again, just dropped. The breaking news, if you're just joining us. Page 6 has dropped photos of Vrabel and Russini from March of 2020, where they're in the bar, they're holding hands, they're kissing, he's got his wedding ring on. What was the day of the Preds Edmonton Oilers game in 2020? I want to say it was a Monday night, because that was the night of the tornado, March 2nd. So this was basically a week after the tornado. What was Vrabel doing in New York? I mean, wasn't Vrabel at that point in time? Wasn't he, getting ready for free agency in the draft? Why was Vrabel in New York? But the photos that page 6 has in this story, I want to make sure I get this right with all the different, let's see, those are the old photos. It's like I can't even keep up anymore. All right, here we go. 1 photo, 2 photos, 3 photos, 4 photos, 5 photos, 6 photos, 7 photos, 8 photos, 9 photos. 9 photos. Who in 2020 was looking to get 9 shots of Vrabel and Russini hanging out? So if you're looking at the stream, or if you were looking at the stream, you could see the 3 photos of the 9. Again, doesn't this look like a movie? Like when the FBI is investigating somebody, and so the FBI, it's got that little click sound, like click, 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 and then you see all the photos. That's what this looks like. I mean, I understand if Russini's going through a divorce and her husband hires a PI, or Vrabel's wife is on to him and she hires a PI. I understand that. 6 years ago, though? And who would be following Vrabel and Russini for that long? And I can't imagine the New York Post has had those photos for 6 years. I can't imagine that. I mean, again, I think what happened is the New York Post got the first photos and they published them and it blew up. I thought yesterday the reason that they put those other photos out there that didn't really tell us anything new was simply because they wanted to double dip. They wanted to get more clicks. Then this comes out, and this is a nuclear bomb when it comes to Vrabel. One person texted me and said the new Vrabel story makes it clear who the real victim was. I'm guessing that's Jen Vrabel, because they were together. They've been married since 99, and they were married when those photos were taken. Mr. Shake Shack was not. Not that I don't have sympathy for him, but whoa, holy crap. One person says somebody sold him when the time was right. Agreed. I mean, I almost wonder if somebody forgot about it, like old baseball cards, then saw the first story blow up in the New York Post and was like, oh my God, I got these photos on my phone. I saw them at the bar. But again, it looked, the Post photos looked like an FBI movie or a CIA thing where they're like watching the foreign adversaries from afar in the bush. One person says, I think people are having open relationships more than we think. I don't know, man. Maybe. But if Vrabel was having an open relationship, don't you think he would have gone on like Oprah's couch and talked about something like that when they first came out? You know, I was thinking about this earlier today, and it feels like the nuggets just keep dropping as far as the Vrabel thing is concerned. So it's almost like I can't say like, oh, this is the end of it, or, oh, you know, this is not coming back, or, oh, this is, because I like, it's, as soon as I thought yesterday it was the end of Vrabelgate. And now it's like every 6 hours there's something new with this story, and the draft is in 7 hours. So who knows? But I was thinking in my head this morning, if Vrabel truly wanted to have the Oprah's couch where he sat down with somebody and it was all right, let's talk this out. Let's have this in-depth, investigative, sit-down chat. Again, the Oprah's couch moment. Who would the best person for Vrabel to do that with be? And I was like, would it be like a Jay Glazer? Would that guy be the right guy to sit down? No, because Glazer's an insider and insiders are part of this. And okay, not him. Could it be any of the guys on the pregame shows? I can't imagine Bill Cowher sitting down with Vrabel and actually asking a hard question. Should it be a show like 60 Minutes where Vrabel goes on and answers and gets at? I don't know who Vrabel should sit down with and talk this out, but I think he's got to do it. I'll volunteer for it. I don't think he'd take me up on it, but if you really wanted to come clean, you would sit down with me, because again, Vrabel knows I'm going to ask the real questions, and he's going to have to, at some point, if he's going to want people to forgive him, or if he's going to want people to believe anything about him, he's going to have to really have one of those sit downs. But man, one person says she got married in September, so she was probably engaged. I don't know that exactly, but one person says he could go on Call Her Daddy. Yeah, although Call Her Daddy's in the news for all the bad reasons right now, apparently. I guess Alex Cooper's husband is the CEO of Unwell, which is Alex's brand, and apparently he is just getting crushed out there. Which, by the way, I do think that if the Unwell Network, now I love Braden and I love Believe, we're a part of both of them. If the Unwell Network reached out to me and they were willing to give me Alex Cooper's promotion, I think Stillman and Company would be a great sports program for the Unwell Network. That's just me. Nathan says, bro didn't even take off the wedding ring. That is true. I mean, I don't know how many people feel this way. I'm like, dude, the wedding ring. But both Caroline and a guy, Mark Ennis, who I used to work with in Louisville, both texted me like, with his wedding ring on. And what's that say about Dianna? Not that Dianna didn't know that Vrabel was married, but it's like he's got his ring on and Dianna so doesn't give a fuck. And probably never did. TDG says, damn you, Vrabel taking our shine off of draft day. You know, I listened to Rand Carthon's interview with TD on Talking with TD. It was a good interview. I do kind of wonder what Rand Carthon really thinks when it comes to the latest in Vrabelgate, especially after the CJ Stroud drama. And just to recap for you, if you missed it, the CJ Stroud drama was kind of the big moment where I'm like, okay, you two are fucking and it needs to stop because you're hurting the football team. This was on draft night 2023 when all the rumors started to percolate from Dianna Russini that Tennessee was trying to move up from 11-3 to take CJ Stroud.
Field, I sat with Titans new GM Rand Carthon in his office to go over the mood of the building on draft eve, as well as try to get more information as to what they are going to do with that pick at 11. And he tells me they're really calm, they're prepared. In fact, head coach Mike Vrabel and him sat together for 2 hours and they set their draft board. They are ready to go for Thursday night. So what are they going to do with their pick at 11? Carthon tells me they're open to everything. They're willing to move out. They're willing to stay. They're also willing to move up. In fact, I spoke to some sources around the league, teams like the Arizona Cardinals, who have taken calls from the Tennessee Titans about perhaps trading up. Now, the player they're going for, Carthon wouldn't tell me what they're doing, but my sense is the Tennessee Titans have their eyes on a quarterback, and they're going to do everything they can to go get him.
I mean, damn. And so that broke, and all of a sudden, I remember draft day 2023. And I remember the draft days very, very specifically, and I think I'll remember this one too. But I remember draft day 2023. And this is one thing, by the way, I love about this new format and doing a show like this where it's like, oh, there's news, let's go live, as opposed to having to wait until 2 o'clock to jump on the air the way that I had to. And then, I'd be on from 2 until midnight in the draft. But I remember draft night 2023 or draft day, preparing for the day, and I had just assumed that Bryce Young, CJ Stroud were off the board. The Titans have been linked to Anthony Richardson. They've been linked to Will Levis. There was all kinds of talk about who might be there at 11. And would they take Christian Gonzalez, or should they take, one of the offensive linemen in the draft, whatever. And all of a sudden, the CJ Stroud stuff started happening. I'm like, okay, let's do some more work on CJ Stroud. Let's talk CJ Stroud. Let's whatever. And for 4 hours that day, we talked CJ Stroud. And then Charles Robinson said that Houston was going to go with Will Anderson. They caught wind, changed their mind, took Stroud, and then traded the motherlode to get Anderson, who was the best player on their board. And that was the moment for me where I was like, all right, enough of y'all's fucking. Because now you're hurting the team. Now, I didn't say it like that, but I just dropped a bunch of hints. Like, I think there's something there. So, I mean, this is crazy. And the amount of people at the time who called me a conspiracy theorist, and I got that one right. One person says, just reading through these, and so one person says Josh McDaniels hired the PI to take Vrabel out and take his job. I don't think so. I don't think Josh McDaniels was worried 6 years ago about who Vrabel was hanging out in the bar in New York City with. Let this be a lesson to everybody out there wanting to do something nefarious, whether it's cheat on your spouse, cheat on your taxes, whatever it may be, embezzle money. If you do something bad, eventually you'll get caught. Again, this is a bar in New York in 2020. Now, technically, they were both celebrities. He's an NFL head coach, and she's an ESPN reporter, so maybe they should have done a little bit better. But this is a bar outside of their city. It's a hole in the wall. They thought they could be incognito. The ambiente was the ambiente was a very nice resort that people take their mistresses to. It's a very private and secluded. 2 hours out of town from where they were supposed to be. I mean, they did take precautions to not get caught. They just couldn't get caught because when you do something, there's almost inevitably a trail of evidence. So let this be a lesson to anybody who wants to cheat on anything in their life. Chatham says, don't get a big head, but holy shit, you nailed this story. I nailed that. I nailed Sam Darnold. You got to give me that. I nailed Sam Darnold. I nailed Rand Carthon. I mean, I think I've got a pretty good feel on things that I study every day. That's why I talk about this insider stuff. I can tell you everything up and down about the Titans. I cannot tell you about these other teams because I don't watch these other teams like I watch Titans. I know pretty much everybody on the Titans roster. I know everybody pretty much on the Titans roster over the last 8 years. I don't know that about the Arizona Cardinals, and I don't think it's physically possible to know all of that about a team or all the inner workings or all the tells of the coach or all. I think it's impossible to do that 32 times. I just know the Titans. Josh says, so when do you think this actually started? No idea. I think I looked into this in 2023 when all the CJ Stroud stuff went down, and we spent weeks talking about what happened on draft night, who said what to whom, and I believe it was Dianna, who was at ESPN, who reported when Mike Vrabel was going to, he was the Houston Texans linebacker coach, and he was going to interview for the 49ers defensive coordinator job. And I think Dianna Russini reported that. That's like the first time that Russini broke a Vrabel scoop. And I want to say that was back in like 2017 or 2016. So, I mean, damn. One person said that photo of them two in the Titans training facility did look a bit intimate. I mean, it just looked like two people taking a picture. But now it looks crazy. One person said, how many other affairs is Vrabel having? His credibility is completely shot. I don't know. There was a rumor I heard when I went to cover the press conference last week, and I'm not sharing that rumor. But there was a rumor that I heard of I'm not sharing it, though. I will not do this to that person. It was just secondhand gossip. But I did hear of something else, but I don't know if it's true or not. So we're going to leave that one alone. Back to your comments here on the program. One person says, Jared getting a Pulitzer. No way. The capital J journalists hate this story. How do you think Greg Bedard in Boston feels after he was all, no, the other day? The only reason people care about this is because you need something to talk about. No, the reason people care about this, and I like Greg Bedard, the reason people care about this is because it is a high-profile affair in the NFL, which is the most popular thing in America. That's what it is. Bedard says, 11 hours ago, this story is now a full-blown PR disaster by the Patriots. Why now? After he just spoke to the team and the media, why not do this privately? Is something else coming? Bedard says the answer is yes. I do think Bedard has to send out a tweet saying, okay, this is now a big story. Now I have to admit, this is a football story. This is a big story. I mean, they had Stephen A. Smith. ESPN has avoided talking about Vrabelgate like it was the plague. And Stephen A. Smith was talking about it today. One person says, any chance you can get that admission? You were right from Rex Road. Now, let me just say this, and I'm not going to accuse Joe of lying, per se. I'm not going to say Joe is a liar, but I believe Joe Rexroad, who even texted me today and said, I don't get any sort of credit for having been right in 2022. I think even Joe Rexroad knows in his heart that I was right. But no, he'll never give me an apology. That would be like Vrabel giving me an apology. That would be like Vrabel saying, Jared, I owe you an apology for that. Think like a man, think like a dude. You'll never be like me. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry I said that, which I don't care. I mean, when Vrabel said it, I enjoyed it because I knew it would be good fodder for the radio show. I didn't take it personally. I never take anything Vrabel does personally. I like Vrabel. But when he did that, like if he apologized to me, I would be stunned because Vrabel doesn't apologize. If Joe Rexroad apologizes to me, I'd be stunned. Joe Rexroad and Kaharski can never admit when I'm right. Joe is more funny about it. Paul is more angry about it, but the two of them can never admit. And that's okay. Boston says this ain't from the same person that took those pictures in Sedona. I kind of believe that too. I can't tell. Is this when it comes to the photos that were taken on Vrabelgate? And I'm talking about the new New York Post ones today. Again, we'll put those back up on the screen. Again, these are courtesy of the New York Post. Were these new photos right here? Like, did the same guy have them? Like, again, let's use the theory that I talked to the source, and the source close to Dianna told me it was the husband, and that they believe that the husband hired a PI. Did the husband hire a PI before the wedding to basically say, hey, I want you to keep your eyes on my girl just so I know what I'm getting into, because I don't know, maybe not. And then the PI gave the husband the photos, and the husband still was like, well, I'm going to marry her anyways. I don't know. Like, I do not know. But again, that does it definitely looks like it's cell phone quality instead of but if you're going to sneak pictures, you got to do it with a phone, because you can't sneak a giant Canon camera. So if you're going to take those photos, it does have to be with a phone. You have to be like, okay, I'm looking at my phone. Click, 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 click. Somebody just texted me. If I could tell you the people that I had texting me right now, and I'm not saying it's highfalutin people, but it's just such a random cadre of people. Someone texted me and said, what if something crazy comes out that Dianna's husband is not the father? If this becomes full-blown Maury Povich and they do the DNA test and, look at the nose, Maury! Maury, look at the nose! Maury, that son, that baby is nothing like mine. I had nothing to do with that. She was seeing 800 guys at the time. There's no way, no how. Look at the nose, Maury! Maury, look at the nose! Coming up next, we do the DNA test. What are you going to say, Brad, if it comes back that you are the father? Maury, if that's the case, I'm going to be a man. I'm going to be a man, Maury, and I'm going to take care of my responsibility. Okay, let's get to it. In the case of 8-year-old Raina, Brad, you are not the father. Oh! And then Brad starts going around to the crowd that booed him earlier. I told you, I told you, I told you, I told you. Ah! And then the woman runs backstage and Maury has to console her and everything. If that ends up happening, it may break the internet. It may break the internet. It may break the internet. It may actually, they may have to delay a week of games in the NFL. And everybody is pointing out to me that apparently one of Dianna's kids is named Michael. I hate talking about Dianna's kids because they didn't do anything wrong. But holy crap. One person says the husband is like, get my money, king. Phew. Oh, man. One person said, what do we think? He told his players, and by the way, thank you for the super chat. What do we think he told his players Monday? I've loved this woman for 6 years. Yeah. I'll be completely honest when it comes to the players and just my experience. I don't think the players care. Even now. I think the players are in the locker room with their phones out, be like, holy shit. Look at that. But I don't think that they actually care. One person says, surely the NFL will have to look into this now, even though they said they weren't. 6 years is ridiculous, and that is tampering. Well, one thing that bothered me was on the night of the 2022 draft. So I already had my suspicions about Vrabel and Dianna, but I didn't know about Vrabel and Dianna. You know, again, I had my suspicions, but it was not the CJ Stroud draft night that was just, again. But that night, I was doing the show with Derek, TD, and Chris Sanders. And when the AJ trade news broke, TD was like, yo, I've got to get on the phone with ESPN. I've got to start writing about this. And TD was kind of managing both at the same time. And TD was the one who talked to AJ. When AJ said, I would have stayed for $22 million, they were offering me $16 million. You know, TD got AJ on the record, and AJ. And after the draft night was over, Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter had Sal Paolantonio to talk about AJ going to Philly and Dianna Russini talking about AJ going or leaving the Titans. And I'm like, why would you talk to Dianna Russini about that over Teron Davenport, who works for you and is talking to AJ right now? So there have been a lot of scoops. There have been a lot of situations. There have been a lot of discussions that have involved Dianna Russini and Vrabel, and that includes the Titans and other teams. And I'm not saying the NFL will look into this. I think the NFL just wants this thing to go away at 7 o'clock tonight. But I don't know what has to come out for the NFL to say we're getting involved, but I think we're getting close to it. This story is just freaking nuts. One person says this is about to get messy. He should resign. About to get messy. This is when it got messy. So at first when the story dropped, it was rumor, conjecture, innuendo. They denied it. You know, maybe there is an explanation here. There wasn't, but maybe there was. We're waiting for the explanation. We don't get the explanation. It looks like they're lying. Then it got messy when all these clips started coming out of Dianna talking about her husband with Stugotz and Dan Lebitard and everybody else. Then it got really messy when Dianna resigned. Because when Dianna resigned, Dianna put out that thing, that statement that was just so, say, irresponsible, but it was just so condescending and so full of shit. And that's when it got really messy. Now, this is a full-blown DEFCON 1 tire fire. It's not starting to get messy now. It has been messy. One person said, it is being said Vrabel's wife is pissed. I don't know about that. If I was Vrabel's wife, I'd be pissed too. You know, a lot of times when it comes to cheating spouses, sometimes when you've been together long enough and it's like, well, we've been together for forever and, fine, go do it. But I don't want it reflecting back on me. That does happen. Well, when it's all over the New York tabloids, it's reflecting back on you. And that would piss somebody who even might be okay with it. Of like you having a side chick, that would still piss them off because it's embarrassing to them. One person said Robert Kraft tried to kill the story. The corruption is unreal. I don't think Kraft tried to kill the story. If Kraft wanted to kill the story, I think he would have called Rupert Murdoch. And if he called Rupert Murdoch, I think Rupert, who owns the Post, would have killed the story because Fox is reliant on the NFL and they need Dallas Cowboy games and they need the Green Bay Packers and they need good matchups and they need Mahomes and they need Josh Allen. And if the NFL wants to pork a broadcast partner, they put the Carolina Panthers on there. So I don't think Kraft tried to get this story killed. I do not believe that. Maybe it's true. I don't know. One person said, oh my God, I never thought about Teron being slighted in this. He's one of my favorites. Well, they could have put him on TV. They could have come out. We were at the sports bar attached to the Sound Stadium. ESPN could have sent a truck, just parked it right out there. TD hops on the truck, put him on with Scott Van Pelt. But nope, they went to Dianna. Dianna had the scoop. One person said, imagine if they get married and their first dance is a Coldplay song. Yeah. I mean, the Coldplay thing didn't last for 3 weeks. This is lasting for 3 weeks. Unbelievable. This whole thing is just, oh my God, this thing is just such a freaking, even for me, this story is absurd. 6 years. Not that the affair was going on for 6 years. That I get. I mean, I thought the affair was going on 4 years ago. That somebody had those pictures and held onto them for 6 years. Is there a statute of limitations on something like that? Like, can we say, hey, Vrabel, we need to give Vrabel 6 years? Or is it just, nope, that was 6 years ago and it proves a pattern, and Vrabel, you are fucked? Tony says, good coach, but he has to go. Robert Kraft at some point probably won't get asked about this on the record. But I do think Robert Kraft at some point either has to be behind his coach or he has to publicly spank his coach. Either this is a personal matter for Mike Vrabel and we are behind him as our coach 100%, or I talked to Mike and Mike said that he regrets it, and I was very disappointed when I saw the photos come out, but I know that Mike is our coach, so or he needs to fire him. But at some point, Kraft does have to give us an indication on how he feels about all of this. TDG says Rand is owed an apology. Well, Rand still sucked. I mean, even the year that Vrabel was gone, Rand screwed everything up. But I do think that Vrabel, operated, in a way to throw Rand under the bus. One person says Vrabel needs to step away from the Patriots and sort out his personal life and then maybe try being a coach again. Well, isn't that what he's doing on Saturday? Is that he's not going to be there for day 3 of the draft because he's going with his family for counseling and everything else? Someone says, why is Stillman's Kraft impression the same as Irsay's? No. Okay, here's Robert Kraft. May Jim Irsay rest in peace, by the way. We're very lucky to have Josh McDaniels as our offensive coordinator because Josh McDaniels and Mike Vrabel see eye to eye on so much with the quarterback. Irsay is, people ask me why Chris Ballard's still the general manager, and the only reason is because every time I have some stupid cockamamie idea, Chris is like, oh yeah, Jim, I love it, boss, let's do it. I think those are two different impressions, but that's just me. Vrabel. One person says, I wonder if he'll show up for the draft at all with those picks coming out. I wonder if Vrabel is going to have to do the press conference tonight. Like, if you're the NFL, it is mandated that the head coach talk to the media today. So I believe, let me pull this up just as a reference point. I mean, I don't want to drag the Titans into this, but I'm just using what their public relations schedule is going to be for the draft. Okay, so tonight, maybe not, because tonight it's only Mike Borgonzi who's available at the conclusion of round 1. Friday, it's only Mike Borgonzi. Saturday, it's only Mike Borgonzi. And then Tuesday, Dave Ziegler. By the way, with all due respect, who gives a fuck about Dave Ziegler? What Dave Ziegler has to say? Whatever. So maybe it'll just be you know what? It's going to be Elliot Wolf tonight. It was originally supposed to be Elliot Wolf and Vrabel, and then Elliot Wolf and Cowden were supposed to do the press conferences. I think it's going to just be Elliot Wolf tonight. But if Vrabel gets up there and they ask him about Caleb Lomu or Casey Concepcion or Avion Terrell, and they do not ask him about these pictures, every person in that Boston core should be fired and be in media. But woo! Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. This is a good moment to remind everybody to like and subscribe here on the Stillman & Company program. It's free to do both. Turn on your notifications. We'll have the draft show on tonight. And if there's anything that you've learned over the last 24 hours when it comes to the Stillman & Company program, unlike being on the radio, this is what I love about this job, about the transition from the radio to this. But the radio is 4 hours a day, every day, no matter what. And I used to not hate it, but on July 17th, I used to really be like, oh, God, 4 hours. This is an hour of the best stuff. It's all the same takes, just bottled into basically an hour. And whenever there's big, big, big news, we just pop on and go live. And we've got great sponsors like Hiller, and we're adding people to the mix. It's very, very exciting. I do wonder when Robert Kraft has to come out and release a statement and say, do you support Vrabel? Are you looking into it? I don't know. One person says to me, I've been talking to PR pros today just about all kinds of different stuff. One person says to me, they would not be surprised if the NFL blacklists Dianna Russini from any sort of credentialed media outlet. This story has completely jeopardized the integrity of the game. Tampering, award voting, insider intel, indirect public pressure on opposing teams, you name it, it's all wrapped into one. That comes from somebody that I'd say is a PR pro in the field. I mean, I just don't know if any network would take Russini seriously after all of this. One person says, Jared, how were you able to read Vrabel if Vrabel said that you'll never think like him or think like a man? Let me see if we still have that when Vrabel and I got into it. Man, that was some good stuff. When Vrabel and I got into it over the Patriots Hall of Fame. It's so funny how that all went down. It was a 4-hour show. At 2:15, I teased the topic of saying, coming up next, Mike Vrabel is going to hate this next topic. And I feel like for the radio, where you want people to hang on through a commercial break, I felt like that was a pretty good tease. So I say that, like, Mike Vrabel's going to hate this topic. We come back, we play the cuts. And I'm like, am I reading too much into this, Ian, when Mike Vrabel said to Patriot fans to enjoy it? It's a special place. It's not like this everywhere else. Trust me, I've been other places. Was he taking a shot at Amy and the Titans? And Ian, bless his heart, was like, I think you're reading a little too much into it. I'm like, really? You think I'm reading a little too much into it? I just know Vrabel. We used to call it Vrabelese. I know Vrabelese, and I feel like Vrabelese, he's taking a shot at the Titans. Joe Rexrode was like, it's a nothing burger. How could Stilly ever do that? How could he? And the next day, Gentry asked him about it. I was at the press conference, and I appreciate the fact that I, unlike some people in press corps when it comes to Vrabel, because Vrabel can really put you down, I didn't. I just stood up and said, I'm the one who said it. Here's what I said. Take a listen.
Mike, you made a comment during all that that's kind of getting parsed here, talking about...
Who's parsing it, Gentry?
I'm parsing it.
Well, then ask the question, Jared.
The question, when you said that other organizations don't do things as well as the Patriots, and that you know because you've been there, were you referring to this organization?
They've won six Super Bowls in 20 years. That's what I was alluding to. You know what I mean? I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just extremely, a lot of success. And, and I guess just probably having talked to, Bill and, Mr. Kraft and the coaches I know they're on staff. I guess that was just my way of, bringing them good luck on Sunday. No, I mean, that just the amount of success that they had there, that was the whole message was just for myself and the former players and everything, just to not take things for granted. Just the because I got traded myself and went to a team that went 6-10, and it was like, where you're just trying to find ways to win other than knowing that you're going to win when you show up. It was my whole intent of saying that they've had it pretty good there for 20 years, 6 Super Bowls and however many else they went to. That was it, Jared. So appreciate you. You'll never think like me, Jared. We're nothing alike. So I'm not. I'm the dumbest person in here. I promise you. I guarantee you I'm the dumbest person in here. But we will never think alike in anything that we do. So if you ever want to think how I'm thinking, just think the opposite. think like a dude, think like an athlete, think like a grown man, and then you'll think how I'm thinking.
I mean, again, look, I don't have any problem with that. At the time, I didn't really have any problem with it. People were like, Vrabel clowned you! And I didn't even hear the think like a man thing. I heard the, Jared, if you want to know how I'm thinking, and I looked at him and like, think the opposite. And Vrabel was like, think like a man, think like a dude, think like an athlete. And I just looked at it like this is great fodder for the radio show. And this is going to be awesome. And it was. And then every time I ripped on Vrabel, people were like, "You just mad at Vrabel because he doesn't use press cover." I don't care about that. I don't care about that. The worst relationship with a coach or something like that is when they don't care. When they're like, "Oh, you ain't shit. I don't care about you." Instead, Vrabel clearly was pissed off. He throws together that 2-minute word salad, and then you can hear it in his voice, too, when he's like, "Fuck it, I'm going in. Jared, you will never think like me." Okay, Mike. One person said Vrabel is a lying and creepy pig in all caps. I don't know if he's creepy. What makes him creepy? One person says those Vrabel comments aged like milk. I was in the car with Lindsay last week. I've never cheated on anybody, and I know a lot of people who have. Lindsay and I actually wondered before all this. We were just talking one day, and we're like, what percentage of our friends do we think have cheated on on their spouses? Because I think there's something like 60% of people have cheated or something. So I wonder, of our friends, who's done it. And we've been like, what do you think about them? What do you think about them? Whatever. This past weekend, we were in the car, and I said to Lindsay, I go, let me just say this. I can never, ever, ever cheat on you. I've never cheated on anybody before, and I'm not going to start now. I've always believed that when it comes to cheating, if you don't want to be with somebody, get a divorce. I don't like the idea of cheating because I think I have been cheated on before and it ended a relationship, and I know how disrespectful that feels, and I wouldn't want to disrespect somebody like that. I also can't imagine having to get on the phone and talk to my parents and be like, yeah, it didn't work out between us because I couldn't keep my wee-wee in my pants. So all that stuff is reasons of why I wouldn't cheat. But that doesn't mean that people don't do it, and I don't judge if you do or don't. That's your business. That's not mine. But when it comes to people saying this aged like milk, that's why I said to Lindsay, if I were to cheat on you, it would look so bad because of how I've covered the story. Now, I've never said that I'm perfect. I've never said that cheating, should get you fired or anything like. I don't believe that. If Dianna wasn't married and she was still sleeping with Vrabel, I would think that she should lose her job because her job is to report the news, not protect her boyfriend. Man, oof. One person says Vrabel versus Sharon Moore. You know what's crazy is I know both guys. I like both guys. Vrabel. One person says the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. To a certain extent. I mean, I think there are guys that have cheated on their wives that are still good people, and I think there are guys that have cheated on their wives who are still good at football. So that one, I guess, is a little different. One person says Vrabel is smug and passive-aggressive and tries to do the outdated alpha BS all the time. You know, I've always said this about people that are like, Jared, you are intimidated by Vrabel, or Jeffrey Simmons is you. I bet you wouldn't say that to his face. I'm like, yes, I would. First of all, saying something on the radio or on a podcast or whatever, it is the same as saying it to their face. Bad news travels fast. If you say something about somebody that is remotely negative, it will get reported to them in way worse fashion. Or in the case of people like Vrabel, they read it and they listen to it themselves. Vrabel, when he was with the Titans, was notorious for getting upset about what people said or people wrote. So to me, it's the same as saying it to their face. But every time people would say something like, Jared, you wouldn't say that to Jeffrey Simmons. I'm like, what is Jeffrey Simmons going to do? Haul off and hit me? $1 million football player? Not that I would sue over that, because I think I'd like to look like the bigger man and say, hey, he lost his cool. He apologized. It's all good. But if $1 million player slugs a talk show host, that is a lawsuit and a half. That is a suspension from the league. That is, if you're a coach, probably going to lose your job. I'm like, these guys aren't going to do anything. So when it came to Vrabel, I always just kind of read through that passive-aggressive bullshit. But boy, he was passive-aggressive. One of the most passive-aggressive things he did was in one of those last press conferences he had as coach of the Titans, when they asked him if he still wanted to be the coach of the Titans. And he said, yeah, you know, if we can do this the right way with Rand and Chad and Anthony Robinson. And I'm like, oh, that's a passive-aggressive shot at Rand. That's like Rand needs his buddies instead of just Rand can do it himself. One person says, Brady, meanwhile, gets to own the Raiders and still call games. The NFL may come down on them because they got caught, but they still bend over backwards for the golden child. You mean the golden child that they suspended for 4 games without any proof? Don't throw Brady under the bus here. Don't be throwing Tom Brady under the bus. Tom Brady is a great player. To say guys don't care, tell that to Trevion Henderson and Drake May and others that live a certain way. They do not need to be educated on anything. I don't care about the Trevion Henderson story, about Vrabel saying, I don't even know exactly what happened. Some NBA player had some anti-gay take, and Trevion Henderson tweeted it with a Bible verse, and Vrabel said he needed to be educated on it. I don't care about that. I don't know about that. I don't give a rat's ass about that. Like, do that on your own time. Not interested in that. Man. Holding on to pictures since 2020. Was there a payoff or blackmail? I definitely think that Page Six paid for those pictures. The ones from the... I was talking to Sarah Giles, who runs our social media here. And I said this to her, and I said, this looked like Red Door in Nashville. Like when I first saw the picture, I'm like, oh my God, that's Red Door right there on Division Street. But apparently it was in New York City. Apparently everybody on the internet is just absolutely losing their minds at the fact that Diana's first son is named Michael. Whew. I better get that one figured out, because that's a really bad look. Whew. One person says it's obvious why Jonathan Kraft, who is smarter than Vrabel and somehow a bigger prick than he is, and with fuck you and me money, never gave Vrabel full control. I contend, and I've never talked to J-Rob about this, and even if J-Rob did it, I don't think he'd ever admit it to me. I think Kraft called J-Rob before Vrabel got hired by the Patriots, and he told him, you need to keep somebody in the personnel department to keep him from trading away Derrick Henry and good players like that, because Vrabel and Rand wanted to trade Derrick Henry, and Amy said no. So you need to keep an eye on him there, and then you need to get the offensive coordinator right so you don't have Todd Downing coaching Drake May. That's what I believe. One person says, with the iCloud and Google Drive, we end up with so many pictures and documents from years and years ago. Yeah, I'm just of the belief that if you don't want to get in trouble for doing something, don't do it. And if you're going to do something and you decide you're going to risk it and hope that you don't get caught, just be ready for when that moment comes to say, yeah, I did it. Because if Dianna and Vrabel had said, yeah, I did it, this is a totally different discussion. If Dianna Russini were to have told Page Six, if Mike Vrabel were to have told Page Six, instead of, this is laughable and doesn't deserve any more discussion, or if Dianna Russini had said, yeah, Mike and I have been having a relationship, I'm working through things with my husband, but whatever. Then it would have turned into this whole discussion of, is it right for a coach and a reporter to be having a relationship? The answer to that, by the way, is no, it is not right. But that would be the whole discussion. But because they lied about it, now it makes the story a lot worse. One person says, time to call Maury Povich. We may just call this the Jared Springer Show. Change the name from Stillman and Company to the Jared Springer Show. And then Joe Rexrode will love that because he'll be like, I told you it was Playboy Radio. I bet you Joe Rexrode is watching right now, by the way. Joe said, good news for you. Sometime next week, you can count on some Vrabel photos so you can keep doing your emergency sex talk pods. I replied to Joe and I said, my emergency pod earlier today was about him leaving the team on day 3 of the draft. Joe says, yeah, that's worth a pod. No possible way to handle this thing worse or look worse. Talking about Playboy Radio. One person says, hindsight being 2020, not thinking like Vrabel or being like him was a compliment. He should have tried not foregranting his wife. I do wonder now if he were to think about it like, well, you know, I said, think like a man, think like a dude, be like me, Jared. I'm okay. Like, I'm not perfect, guys. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, no, Mike, you need to be like me. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think Mike Vrabel should want to be like me. You know, there are certain things about me that I hope my son can emulate. There are also things about me that I hope my son doesn't inherit from me. I'm not trying to stand myself up here. But never once in my life, even after Vrabel said that, never once in my life did I ever sit there and say, I need to be more like Vrabel. And they certainly don't feel that way now. Again, taking a look at the pictures, this is why we're all here. The new New York Post photos in Vrabelgate show them in the bar together in 2020. Which is just unbelievable. And it's so odd. There's no denying this stuff. Vrabel going to be gone for day 3 of the draft. Trent says, let's bring Rexrode back on. Rexrode does not want to come back on the program. One person says, Rexrode is digging a hole deeper so he can shove his head even further into it to avoid reporting what he sees. Rexrode misunderstands his job as a reporter. It's not that he misunderstands his job as a reporter. The problem with Joe is that with Joe, it's got to be completely black or white all the time. We used to always do this in Jared versus Joe when Caroline would be like, Joe, do you think the Vols can salvage the season? Joe's like, can they? They might be 0-3, but if they win every game the rest of the way, they'll win the SEC. So can they? Yes. Will they? No. So that's kind of the difference. Boomhauer. Boomhauer has entered the chat. Boomhauer says, "Now tell you what, man, double the dango, man, Mr. Shake Shack, and double the dango, get the dango testing done, man. I tell you what, man, talk about dango, yo, man." Boomhauer, good to see you. Entering the chat. You know, I kind of, a lot of people are talking about the son being named Michael. People are talking about the DNA testing, but, you know, is Vrabel the father, Maury Povich? I kind of want to leave that stuff out of this because Dianna and Vrabel's kids, Dianna's kids and Vrabel's kids are civilians. Now, Vrabel's kids are grown up. So even though this sucks for them that they have to deal with it, they should be equipped in life to be able to handle this one way or another. I'm sure it sucks and it's a bombshell and all of that. But Dianna's kids are little, and I don't like them being brought into the discussion. But the fact that the first kid's name is Michael is going to be a humongous topic of concern both around the internet and pretty much in general. Man. And I was really excited about the fact that I was just really excited about the fact that in years past, I used to get on the air for 2 hours or 4 hours and go from 2 to 6 and then do the draft show from 6 to midnight. And so this year I wasn't going to have to do that. And I was just going to get on the air. I mean, we did our show yesterday, finished with our final mock draft, said goodbye. I thought about taking the stuff that I need to take down with me to ML Rose for the draft show tonight, and I didn't. And then the new pictures came out, so we did an emergency pod yesterday. Then the Vrabel news came out overnight, so we did an emergency pod this morning. And then these pictures came out, which is just unbelievable. One person says they're saying the pick is AI. No. The New York Post is not running AI pictures. There are like 17 of these pictures. I think there are 9. There's no way these pictures are AI. If they're AI, then Vrabel and Dianna can sue the New York Post. It says, does the husband go for alimony from Mrs. Dianna? I don't know how that works. One person says, may these pods ease Jared's mind when we draft Sonny Styles at 4. Everything I'm hearing is that it's going to be Jeremiah Love at 3 to the Cardinals and Arvell Reese to the Titans at 4. Everything I'm hearing is that the Cardinals and the Titans want to move back and they want a first rounder in next year's draft. And I'm telling you, nobody's trading first rounders in next year's draft to move up in this draft. This draft sucks. So nobody is trading a first rounder in next year's draft to move up for players in this year's draft because next year's draft is supposed to be a good draft and this year's draft is awful. That's why the Bengals didn't give away a pick next year. They gave away the 10th pick because this draft sucks. That's why Philadelphia is waiting until June 1 to trade trade A.J. Brown because they want a first rounder in next year's draft that could be 22 and not a 31st in a bad draft. So I think everyone's going to stick and pick Mendoza, Bailey, Love, Reese. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing it's going to be Reese. And I will love it if they draft Arvell Reese. Somebody says, I think the Russinis live in New Jersey, don't they? No fault divorce state. I have no idea where they live. Apparently, Dianna saved some guy from a car, that got wrecked or whatever in the New York Post last week, and nobody cared. Let me just say, if it happened, I don't know if it did or didn't. I don't know what to believe anymore. If it did, good for Dianna. Man, you people. Just crazy. Okay, I think that's good enough for our Vrabelgate reaction here. I don't know when I'm going to be on next, but we will be on at 6 o'clock live from ML Rose in East Nashville. Again, our draft party for 440 Sports is completely sold out. So watch the draft show. And then tomorrow night, Hutton and I will be having a draft reaction or a draft show during the draft tomorrow as well. Again, I'm hearing it's going to be Arvell Reese. Let's hope. Stillman and company. 6 o'clock for sure. Maybe before then. Who knows? I need to get a source of the New York Post so I can know when to plan to go live or not. Stillman and company right here on the 440 Sports Network.